Both appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Caribbean drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the latest edition of Views on the News. And we have regular panel members here today. We have Guy from Manchester. We have Tercia from South Africa. Dread Pirate from British Columbia. And David Orenstein from Manhattan. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. So leaping straight into the first item of news, you've been aware of this ongoing issue in Iran, where an unfortunate victim got killed in police custody for not wearing her hijab. Well, they're trying to toughen up because a lot of women have followed that example. And so a hardline Iranian MP issued an ultimatum to the judiciary to come up with measures to stop women flouting the rules on headscarves. But some women continue to defy these rules, and 2 were arrested in Iran after being attacked with yogurt. I don't know whether you saw that video in Global Atheist News, our parent show, but this man in a shop accosted them because they had their hair exposed, and he then grabbed a pot of yogurt and threw it all over them. So that video went viral. It was just a closed circuit TV video from inside the shop. But the women have been arrested for not covering their hair in public. However, the man has also been arrested for disturbing public order. Any views on that?
They got him in the same cells?
I mean, it is quite interesting that the man has been arrested. I think that's a development. I don't think, well, I don't know whether that kind of conduct would have been criminalized before. So it is interesting.
Unless he's been arrested because he wasted some yogurt. We don't know. But, a friend of mine shared a photograph of herself with the David statue. So it's an apron with the David statue printed on it, and it looks very lifelike, and it looks as if she's a naked man. So I'm wondering if the women in Iran wear headscarves that are like hair, and they wear that, will they still be arrested? I mean, that could be something serious for them to consider, because imagine I'm wearing a headscarf that looks like hair, and then I'm arrested, and they say, no, I'm wearing a headscarf.
Right.
Yeah.
I wonder how that would go down. I'm just, as a protest action.
That's a creative idea. I think we ought to encourage them to do that.
Absolutely. But for the minute, I thought you were going to say, Tercia, wear a headscarf with the imprint of David on it.
Well, that wouldn't be so effective, The thingamajigs would sit in the wrong place. But maybe somebody out there could do that, and they could try that.
I thought you said a headscarf with imprints of tits on them. That's what I thought. Did anyone hear us hear that?
This is a family show, Guy.
Yes, I may be letting my imagination play with me.
Teats.
Well, turning back to a more serious item of news, one young lady, PhD student, was shot by Iranian security forces because she was protesting. And the bullet, they've been told to aim for the eyes, apparently. And she lost the sight of her right eye. However, 3 months later, she felt brave enough to share the video of her ordeal on Instagram. And she said in this video, You aimed at my eyes, but my heart is still beating. Thank you for taking the sight from my eye, which has opened the eyes of so many people. The light inside my heart and the hope of good days to come will keep me smiling. But your heart and your commander's heart are getting darker every day.
Wow.
That's
so
profound.
what kind of gun are they using to shoot people in the eyes? Because it's not a gun that clearly pierces the brain. It what are they using to
Is
aim
it
at the
rubber
eyes?
bullets?
No, it's genuine. It might be a 22, a small caliber. It's a genuine bullet. She went to Italy and had major surgery to remove it from her head. And she said, I'm going to exhibit this bullet in an international court in the future.
Sure.
Horrible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Staying with Iran, 20 schoolgirls were transferred to hospital after the latest wave of poisoning attacks that have sickened thousands of people across the country over more than 4 months.
Yes.
Do
Were
they
they
know
being
who's responsible
poisoned
for this?
No, but UN experts have criticized the Islamic Republic for failing to protect the schoolgirls, for preventing further attacks, and for failing to conduct swift investigations. The UN people said, we fear that they are orchestrated to punish girls for their involvement in the movement that's called Woman, Life and Freedom, and for expressing their opposition to the mandatory hijab and voicing their demands for equality. So obviously the UN is suspicious that this mysterious poisoning in schools, which since 2022 November, 5,000 students have suffered symptoms, and so 200 schools across the country have been victimized. So that's what's going on.
So do they know what the poison is?
No.
Oh.
Well, it's whether it's real or imagined, it's a reaction to something, and obviously it's a reaction against violence against women. I mean, going back to your first story, John, if the guy with the yogurt had a gun, the outcome for those two women would have been radically different, like the person in your second story. So, when you have a regime that is hell-bent, quite literally, in keeping 50% of its population in check and without many rights to, walk freely, speak freely, gather freely, go to school.
Yeah.
What result can you expect?
Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's important to instill fear is a vital tactic of a regime like the one in Iran. So
Right,
yeah.
the more mysterious it is and the more insidious it is, the more fear that they can instill, because you don't know. I mean, if your meals are being poisoned, I'm presuming that these are meals that the children get at school.
The more likely thing is gas, some sort of gas.
Okay.
So it has to be, people have to know about it. If it's a conspiracy, there are people who are involved in committing these crimes. So eventually it will come out as to the purpose, the intention. Someone will flip, and then you'll know.
Indeed.
I'm just going to be a little skeptical here because I'm sure you've all heard of the Havana syndrome.
Right.
About
right.
In the absence of evidence, I would hold off certainly on making any kind of drawing any kind of conclusions.
Yes.
You know, in the complete absence of evidence, like how were they poisoned? What was the, you know, the mode of entry? Was it a gas? Was it in their meals? Was it, you know? And like you say, David, in the you know, if it's a conspiracy, somebody's going to flip, right?
Right.
So yeah, I'm a little bit skeptical on that.
Well, the only thing is that they've been hospitalized, and the symptoms include nausea, fainting, headaches.
So were the people of the Havana syndrome. Same thing.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway,
so we wait.
It would be terrible if it's true. I can say that for sure.
Yeah, but at the moment, it's just unlikely that it's not true.
Yeah, or there's something going on, and it could be mass hysteria. It could be a form of mass hysteria.
Yeah,
you know, it can be like the witch trials, you know.
Yeah.
But in reverse, you know, rather than these people being accused of something, they're just so full of emotion that this is the way. It's almost like in evangelical circles where they do the snake charming, or they walk on water, you know, or they walk on rocks, and you go into a different state of consciousness almost. And if this is the way you can relieve the pressure by expressing it in this way, then everybody does it. It's like speaking in tongues in a way.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of cognitive biases that could come into play to exacerbate both the issue and the symptoms, right?
Right.
Indeed.
Right.
Yeah.
I did the same thing in my first marriage.
Well, yeah. Least said about that, the better, I think. So, moving over to Israel, where there's a lot that's been going on recently, and for example, the Israeli police raided the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which has been occupied East Jerusalem. They claimed that agitators had barricaded themselves in and also barricaded worshippers inside. And this incident included stun grenades and rubber bullets. In a pre-dawn raid, 50 people were hurt. The police said that stones were thrown and fireworks were fired at them in the mosque. Now, the 12 Palestinians were injured, and the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, who's hanging on by the skin of his teeth, said he is working to maintain the status quo at the holy site.
I must say, I was surprised to read this, because I can't see how worshippers during Ramadan staying in the mosque, which is apparently what they wanted to do overnight, can conceivably present a security problem to the Israeli state. I can't see that. You know, what are they going to do inside that mosque? They're going to be praying or sleeping. You know, that is not a reason, even if they're not supposed to be there, it's not a reason for a heavy-handed response, including the invasion of what is to the Muslims a sacred space.
Yes.
So I feel that this is another occasion, sadly, when the Israelis have overreacted. And I feel as if their attitude is that, you know, these people have got to do as they're told and we're in charge, you know, and there's no leeway for thinking, what do we really need here? You know, what are the security issues here? That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like Ireland before the Troubles, isn't it? Or during the Troubles, Northern Ireland.
You know what's interesting to me, and while I'm not a conspiracist, this certainly has taken a lot of focus off of the Netanyahu government and its attempt to take away the rights of citizens. Just a week ago, we were talking about how individuals mobilized and fought against the government, and so what? You know, let's go back to what we've been doing, since 1948 or since 2,000 years ago, if you want to go back that far in terms of tit for tat, because that's right out of a playbook that has been played around on both sides of this Hatfield and McCoy violence, and it certainly means that we're not focused on political oppression anymore.
Yeah.
At least not of the kind that is so fascist against the Israelis, against the Palestinians.
Yeah,
it's been going on for quite a long time.
Yeah.
So,
I like your comparison to the Hatfields and McCoys. I thought that was good.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering, do you think there's a chance that the far right in Israel is fostering or engendering a sort of persecution complex with their citizens, so that they see threats where there is no real threat, because it helps them to further the right-wing cause?
Possibly.
Well, you tend to get paranoia, don't you? An overreaction on both sides in situations like this. Mm-hmm. But the original bone of contention hasn't stopped. There's still, even though Netanyahu tried to defuse it by saying he postponed his law that attempted to take fix the justice by saying that he has to appoint the judges.
Right.
That he said he's going to postpone that, hoping that things would calm down. They haven't. The protests are still going on. But of course, in response to this particular atrocity in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the militants in the Gaza Strip fired rockets at Israel and its military, and the military carried out airstrikes in response. So here we go, tit for tat, over
and over again. And the beat goes on.
Yeah.
Yep.
The beat goes on.
Yeah. So, going to Egypt, where the Egyptians have noticed that Cairo is heavily congested. So, for some time now, they've been building a new capital city, which is down the road about 45 kilometers. And recently, they've constructed a huge record-breaking mosque in this new administrative capital city. It's got the largest. It can accommodate 107,000 worshippers. It covers 19,000 square meters. It's got the highest pulpit, the largest chandelier, and it cost something of the order of 800 million Egyptian pounds. That's almost 26 million American dollars to build. And it's the second biggest mosque in Africa. It's not quite finished yet, but people are complaining because the country's starving.
Yeah.
I understand there's only 2 bathrooms.
I was going to say something about bathrooms.
No, I'm just kidding.
Well, it wouldn't. This is Africa. It wouldn't surprise me. But the only good thing that can be said is that if there's ever a natural disaster, then at least there'll be lots of space for people to have, to have protection against the elements. So maybe 20 years from now, the mosque can be used to house climate refugees or something like that.
There you go.
So
they build it on high ground.
It's not big enough. It may have a space for a large number of worshippers, but there's 30 million starving people.
Yeah.
And
so you said 19,000 square meters?
107,000, is it not?
No, 107,000 worshippers.
Yeah.
I thought it was 19,000 square meters. So that's 2 hectares.
That's quite big.
I've just got this image of 107,000 bottoms in the air.
Oh, and you know where to go if you need shoes. If you need a lot of shoes in a hurry.
Right.
Yeah, outside. Yeah. So anyway, somebody posted on Facebook, because the situation is many people went to Twitter and Facebook to criticize this lavish spending on religious places at a critical time as millions of Egyptians struggle every day to put food on their table.
Yeah.
And one Facebook user said, overspending, insanity, and a waste of money.
Yeah.
The tallest pulpit, the heaviest chandelier, and people can't find anything to eat. Sell this chandelier and pulpit and sell the whole mosque if this will help solve the problem.
The one thing I'm not very sympathetic, because it is my suspicion that of the 30 million people who are starving, I would guess that the vast majority of them are very happy to have this mosque, because they might complain about the money being spent, but the way I know people who are devoutly religious, the more they suffer, the more they tend to revere the religious leaders.
Sure.
Yeah.
So if the protests were coming from the people who were suffering, and if they were saying, no, we can't do this, then I would have sympathy. But it would be interesting to know, but I can't see that the people who are suffering the most would be the ones who protest the most, because I know that the poorest are often the ones who still get duped the most often. I see that where I live every day.
You know, further to that, it's also, I think, a truth that those who can least afford it spend the most on lottery. Same sort of idea is that the more desperate you are, the more the more you rely on false hope to sustain you.
I want to add that in Rochdale, where I live, the mosques are actually very active in providing food to people who are in poverty and who are struggling to put food on the table. And I mean, if that happens in Egypt, I take my hat off to them. I want to put that in the balance. The other thing I'd like to mention is that up in Manchester, the Humanists and Atheists, we put on non-fasting solidarity meals at lunchtime for non-fasting Muslims.
Interesting. Yeah.
And this is just a gesture that we're making.
Absolutely. Well, the thing is that we don't know. You're right that the most desperate are more vulnerable to predation by the religious. But the situation, we don't know who's making these complaints on social media. We haven't got any figures on their wealth, but we do know that Egypt is facing a deepening economic crisis. Its currency has lost half of its value against the dollar over the past year. Inflation has reached its highest level in 5 years, and the country has been selling state assets to Gulf investors to help plug a widening budget deficit. So I think we can conclude that spending money on a mosque at this moment is ill-advised.
I mean, probably it was partly funded by the Saudis anyway. So quite a lot of funds.
Indeed, may have been. Okay, so now we've got to go to Australia, where a jury in Melbourne found an Israeli head teacher who was the head of an ultra-Orthodox Jewish girls' school, and they found that her guilty of rape and indecent assault of pupils, and she's pleaded not guilty. There's more than 24 charges. She spent years hiding in Israel and fighting extradition back to Australia. But in 2021, an Israeli judge ordered her extradition, and so there's been a 6-week trial in Victoria, and she has been found guilty, and I don't know whether she's been sentenced yet. Maybe we have to wait for that. But the 3 of the students whose evidence was used in the case said they were abused in locked classrooms, on school camps, and at the head teacher's home, and that the abuse continued after they had left school and returned as student teachers.
Oh my God.
Well, I mean, that is amazing. Why did they return as student teachers if they had been abused before?
Yeah.
It seems bizarre to me.
It's just, I know you have another story coming up about the abuse that was found in the Catholic diocese in Maryland that went on. And I think it's the same thing here. You have this cycle of sexual violence, predation, power, and all of it being unchecked by secular law because it's kept insulated by organizations, including, the Jewish ones here, that would not let anyone in to take a look. So when you don't have secular law being applied to religious fiefdoms, which operate without any checks or balances, this violence will go on unabated forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sad, but true. Yeah. Okay. So going to France. A French priest rented his church to a Baroque Music and Performing Arts Association, and they put on a show that included dance and pole dancing.
All right.
The local paper said the pole dancing by the gymnast and former French pole dance champion Vincent Grobelny had been skillful, athletic, graceful, impertinent, and some would say sexy.
Well, it wasn't a wooden pole. I just hope it wasn't a wooden pole, because, can you imagine the splinters?
Anyway, it left the audience gasping, apparently, and the 1,000 tickets for the show had sold out very quickly.
Yeah.
So anyway, this priest, he's called Daniel Busenbacher, and this is in Strasbourg on the eastern French-German border. Or is it French-German or French-Belgian border?
Strasbourg is French-German.
Yeah.
That's my mother's. That's my mother's maiden name.
Yeah.
Strasbourg.
Yeah. And he had he has told the police there that he's received threats. And one of the first of all, he personally described the evening's program as flirtatious but soft, and he acknowledged that some people didn't like it. One of the threatening letters that he's received said, "Parishioners should be decapitated. This is not a church, it's a cabaret." And the other one said about the priest himself that his head needs to be cut off because he handed the key to our holy church to a dancing serpent. They've also had copies of the program that was printed for this show, annotated with remarks but slipped under the church door, and the annotations that were added to the program included, "You will die," or "You're going to hell." And he's quoted as saying, "We're used to getting reactions, but not to getting death threats."
Well, hats off to this priest. I think he's absolutely brilliant. In fact, I think it's something I will suggest to the next church event. Ask me for money. I'll just tell them, let me hold a pole dancing evening in your church, and let's see how that goes.
Exactly. I mean, for at least the last 20 years, most organized Abrahamic faiths have been complaining that there aren't enough people coming to the churches.
Yeah. That's right. I mean,
bring them back.
There's a big thing in the UK with large numbers of Anglican churches that are redundant.
Right.
And they're desperate to try and get some use for them. So they co-opt troop. And
in my neighborhood,
burlesque is just the thing.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Halls of entertainment. Yes,
and can you imagine if you have the pole in a cross shape? Imagine all the moves you can make, and it can be a holy evening, and you can. It can be really nice. And if the pole is cross shaped, then even somebody like me who's totally not athletic at all can hang from it. You can do all sorts of things, and it can be really, really serene, and you play nice holy music.
You could add 2 more pole dancers. You could have 3 pole dancers.
You could have one off of each arm.
Exactly.
I think erotic is what we're looking for, not serene.
I'm just wondering whether this dancing serpent was also a talking snake.
Well, and I wonder if they have do you think the priest will be saved from hell if he just hosts a flagellation session after the pole dancing to cleanse the community, and
Now we're getting interesting. But I mean presumably the priest didn't know that there was going to be pole dancing. Why doesn't he just say, I didn't know that it was going to be? I'm terrified. That's what he should have said.
I don't know. The association.
Better to beg forgiveness than ask permission, right?
There you go.
The association that he rented the church to was called Passion Croisée, Interwoven Passions, and it was performing Giovanni Battista Pergolesi's lyrical sequence Stabat Mater, and I'm not quite sure what that is, but
Stabat Mater is the Stations of the Cross in Catholicism. There is a hymn called Stabat Mater, and it's about Mary standing underneath the cross while her son is being crucified. Right. That's Stabat Mater. So it sounds very religious. And I think it sounds to me as if the priest was fooled.
Could have been quite innocent, couldn't it? In so far as anything religious can be.
But I mean, I can imagine it must be fantastic to see an athlete performing to that music in a Gothic church or even just a historical church. It must. I mean, can you imagine the music? And I mean, it's pole dancing doesn't have to be flirtatious or sexy. I mean, it really is. It's an art form, and if you have a gymnast who's performing, I think people are just overreacting.
Certainly, when I do it, it is not flirtatious. But it could be that you would actually have to call my cardiologist in an ambulance.
On standby.
Right, exactly. But it could be, maybe it really was a religious experience expressed through this art. And that's the slippery slope when you have people who don't appreciate, it's not my version of connecting to the divine.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
So send us would you post a link to the performance? Maybe there's video of it. I'd love to see this.
No, I'm sorry. I drew the line about sharing that. I do include videos, as you know, but I didn't think that one was an appropriate one to search out.
Is there one though? I mean, I'm curious now.
Yeah.
Well, Google it. Feel free. Yeah.
I will.
There is such a video, apparently, but I haven't personally sought it out.
Well, I know what I'm doing tonight.
Okay. We'll club together and buy you a poll if you like.
Yeah. Can I watch?
I'll send you the link.
Well, make sure it's not wooden as well.
Okay. Right, moving to that item that David just trailed. Baltimore. 150 Catholic priests have been reported by the associated with the Archdiocese of Baltimore, have been reported recently. It was a long-awaited state report released Wednesday as having abused over 600 children during the last 80 years and escaped accountability following decades of cover-ups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Apparently, that is the oldest Roman Catholic diocese in the US of A, and it spans much of Maryland. And some of the parishes, schools, and congregations had more than one abuser at the same time.
Right.
Including St. Mark's Parish in Catonsville, where there was 11 abusers living and working there between 1964 and 2004. And one deacon admitted that he'd molested over 100 children.
Wow.
Yeah, it makes you want to throw up because, first of all, you know that this is an undercount.
Right.
That's the first thing. The second thing is that if you go to any state in the United States, you'll find, whether it's Boston or New York or San Francisco or wherever, these same things. So this is not a question of one bad apple, or as I wrote about, a whataboutisms. This happens in other things. This is an organization rife with not only predators, but which has taken no responsibility unless and until the light of secular justice is shined on them, and then they wake up. So they stop moving their priests around. They hold to account. A lot of these guys have died. There are families, and it's because it's not just the children. It's the families that suffer from this as well. So it's so multidimensional, and it goes on for so many years that you wonder how an organization that claims to have moral authority can do so when it is so corrupt.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt.
So, David, I just want to correct you. It's definitely, it is a case of one bad apple. It's one big bad apple, and it's called the Catholic Church.
It's a barrel.
Yeah.
Apple.
It's a whole barrel full of just
mind you.
It's not one bad apple. It's the fact that that's what people who are apologists will say. It's one, but come on.
I mean,
some Protestant churches are not squeaky clean either.
No.
Right.
Well,
Well, I was fascinated to hear the name
in religion. Period.
Mm-hmm.
I was fascinated to hear the name Catonsville, because that took me back about 50 years when two Jesuit priests,
Dan Berrigan,
Berrigan brothers, that's right. Yes, protesting against the Vietnam War, poured
That's right.
napalm on draft cards, I think. Is that right? And for that,
I
they
actually
were
knew I knew and was friends with Dan Berrigan up until he
right,
died. Yeah.
right, right. So I think, am I right that they poured napalm on draft cards and got sent to prison, while American soldiers were pouring napalm on people and got medals? That
Yeah.
was the symbolism. That was
Yeah.
an amazing campaign.
The Catonsville Nine.
Was it 9? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the Catonsville Nine, and they'd gone on because this liberation philosophy, and it's primarily amongst the Jesuits of the orders, who are more left of center. Berrigan and his brother left the priesthood and married.
Berrigan and Dan Berrigan, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Dan Berrigan just died of about 4 or 5 years ago, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Does anybody know what the current state of affairs is regarding child abuse in the especially Catholic Church? Because have they tightened measures? Because many of these cases are almost historic cases. So I'd be curious to know whether there's more prosecution of child molesting officials, and whether things have actually changed in the past, say, 10 years, and whether it's still a phenomenon and whether it's still being covered up.
Right.
Because
we're not going to have access to that information, are we?
Right.
They won't release that to the public. And the other problem is that they don't recognize our secular justice system, because it's only him up there to whom they are responsible. So it's just craziness.
One can just hope that the fact that children are being taught about their rights and about bodily autonomy prevents some of these cases. It won't prevent all of it, because there will all be vulnerable children who don't have the wherewithal to stand up for themselves. But I can just hope
there needs to be other safeguards in place.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Where it's probably happening most now is probably not in the West. Central South America and Africa. I'm sure it's religion gone wild.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Because there aren't the same secular safeguards.
Yeah.
So I'm sure one day it will trickle down and you'll get reports.
Yeah.
Because the church will just, move its bad practices to where it's still flourishing, sadly.
Right.
You won't be surprised to hear that this report that we've just been talking about, that revealed all these atrocities, was redacted. So the identities of some of the accused clergy are not known.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I have got some good news to end on.
Yay.
In a historic election, a liberal judge named Janet Protasevich won a seat on Wisconsin's Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, the ideological balance of the state's court will be flipped to more liberal. And
that is good news.
Indeed, that is good news. And the electoral contest was based on the fallout from the Roe v. Wade overturning back in June. And so that was the issue that was under consideration for voters. And this woman was frank about her personal support for legal abortion access. And she won. Finally, we have a comedy item. Watch this video.
That's my cat. It's my Josephine. Looks exactly like Josephine. What's she doing?
Don't you just love it when the cat rubs its bum on the imam's beard?
Yeah.
You know what I loved the most was that the imam seemed so happy about it.
Yes.
He was just going,
There you go.
So
Okay.
I got a quote for the week.
Yeah, go ahead, Dred.
Science flies you to the moon. Religion flies you into buildings.
Yeah, very good.
That's
Yeah,
courtesy of
Brilliant.
Victor Stenger.
Yeah.
it's a good quote. It's
It's my Sunday best.
I see a lot of good comments on it.
Dred, you have risen.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Okay. On that note, I can't finish on a better note than that.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Take the rest of the week off.
Cheers.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Several clergy
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?